Mary, small earthquakes happen all the time in Washington, but this morning, hundreds of small earthquakes were detected under Mount Rainier.
A swarm of small earthquakes rattled Mount Rainier this morning as we give you a live look at the mountain.
What if I told you the next USGS volcanic warning didn't begin with a bang, or even a plume of ash glimmering above the forested slopes of the Pacific Northwest? What if it came, instead, as a coded message, a seismic whisper pulsing far below Washington state, detected only by the world's most vigilant watchers? On July 3rd, 2025, as most of America slipped into a quiet summer afternoon, a different kind of message crackled across the government's scientific networks. At exactly 4:46 p.m. Pacific, geologists at the Cascades Volcano Observatory huddled over screens, eyes flickering, hands poised over alert systems, monitoring their most enigmatic sentinel, Mount Rainier. No clouds of ash darkened the skies.
One of the main hazards at Rainier, it's less explosive, but it has a lot of glaciers on top of it.
No lava burst from the ground. Instead, numbers. Spikes in ground deformation, measured by hyper-precise GPS. Patterns of low-level earthquakes, repeated, rhythmic, and uncanny, detected by an array of seismometers blanketing Rainier's icy flanks. All hinting at one thing: movement beneath the mountain, buried fire, shifting into position. Within the hour, the USGS issued a new notice. Brief, clinical, but electric in its implications. Signals suggested magma movement beneath Rainier. The sleeping colossus was stirring. Yet to millions across Washington, Seattle's suburbs bright with summer barbecues, the small towns of the Puyallup Valley cradled between rivers, life continued undisturbed. Cell phones didn't blare. Sirens didn't wail. But the message was clear for those who were listening. A change was underway. A threat, with the power to rewrite life in the shadow of the Cascades, had begun its slow, silent preparation. Why should a signal deep beneath the ground, even without explosions, command such urgent attention? What is it about Mount Rainier's hidden movements that send chills through volcanologists worldwide? The Cascades' deadly secret. To look at Mount Rainier is to see perfection, a crown of glaciers frosting the summit, meadows gushing with wildflowers each summer, dense green forests, thick with morning mist. It's the highest peak in Washington, the undisputed monarch of the Cascade Range, and for over a century, it has watched over millions, peaceful, majestic, seemingly unshakable. But inside, Rainier is anything but peaceful. Lurking beneath its serene shell is a complex, volatile system of magma tunnels and fractures, so unpredictable and interconnected that even the best monitoring technology can only at times glimpse its intent. Mount Rainier isn't just the highest volcano in the state, it's one of the most dangerous on the continent. The danger isn't theoretical. Experts have long warned that an eruption from Rainier would imperil millions of lives, especially in the densely populated southern and eastern sections of Washington. More than 80,000 people live in Lahar evacuation zones, broad swaths of land mapped out like scarlet veins along river valleys. These are places where, if the mountain's ice-cloaked summit ever melted at speed, mud and debris could barrel towards civilization in minutes. All it takes is a trigger. In one scenario, magma pushing upward contacts the mountain's shimmering glaciers, unleashing floods of water and cement-thick mud flows. In another, a dome of lava could breach a weakened summit, propelling ash, gases, and debris skyward, paralyzing communities below. Or the mountain could simply slip, sending earthquakes racing, not just through Washington, but cascading down fault lines to Oregon and beyond. Mount Rainier is not alone. The Cascades, a chain forged in fire, harbor a dozen other restless peaks. Scientists rely on a web of sensors, seismometers, GPS receivers, thermal cameras, gas detectors, and the vigilant eyes of satellites orbiting far above. Their mission: detect the faintest tremor, the tiniest upward nudge, the whisper of change before disaster becomes destiny. So when the data began shifting, USGS teams didn't wait. They activated the Volcano Notification Service, the backbone for bulletins and updates, and dispatched careful notifications to every emergency agency operating across Washington's valleys and metropolitan sprawl. Here's the unvarnished reality. The most dangerous period in a volcano's life is often its most silent. Movement, deep underground, rarely announces itself with thunder. Instead, it builds like a gathering storm, one measured in numbers and pulses, invisible to all but those who know precisely where to look. Could Washington's next disaster be coalescing beneath these serene, snowbound slopes, hidden in plain sight until the instant it can no longer be ignored? A surge beneath the ice. July's warning didn't arrive in isolation. For weeks beforehand, the network of instruments sprawled across Rainier's flanks, some painstakingly drilled into ancient rock, others nestled at the edge of melting glaciers, had detected a series of subtle, intriguing changes. First came the earthquakes, not strong enough to rattle home, but too rhythmic to ignore. In clusters, what scientists call earthquake swarm, the tremors emerged in patterns that are often linked to magmatic movement, signals repeated at shallow depths, then deeper, then shallower again, as if something vast was finding a new path through the mountain's roots. GPS receivers, anchored to the bedrock, revealed minute shifts, millimetric changes at first, then centimeters. Rainier's southern flank was rising, not just in fits and starts, but with a pressure and persistence suggesting more than mere snowmelt or seasonal thaw. Thermal data, scrutinized by researchers, hinted at temperature changes in localized areas. Satellite sensors began capturing faint but persistent hotspots within Rainier's summit crater, patches of warmth undetectable to hikers, but clear as beacons to those who read the language of mountains. These anomalies remained subtle, nothing like the extremes seen before certain foreign eruptions, but they meant one thing to observatory teams: heat was moving upward. All these signs, even when interpreted in isolation, could be dismissed as quirks of geology. After all, mountains shift, glaciers melt, and earthquakes ripple through the Cascades every day. But week by week, the evidence stacked up, impossible to ignore. And then, in the hours before the USGS notification, gas monitors detected brief erratic spikes in sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide, classic markers of magma breaching new fractures and venting, not in concentrations to threaten life, nothing to send plumes into the air, but as an unmistakable signal. The buried engine of Mount Rainier was active. Why do these small changes matter? Because history shows again and again that volcanoes often offer their truest warnings through a slow, quietly accumulating chorus of minor changes, rather than any dramatic flash of violence. In the months and days before major eruptions worldwide, scientists have often documented similar progressions: pulses of earthquake swarms, rising land, heat anomalies, and bursts of gas. The greater the convergence, the clearer the risk picture becomes. So as these signals multiplied, the USGS reached a decision point, a moment when the combined evidence could no longer be explained by routine processes. Magma activity, while still below the threshold to cause surface change or hazard to the public, was evident, and the time to interpret and to warn had come. But what drives these deep, cryptic pulses beneath a mountain like Rainier? Could this magma activity ever trigger the kind of disaster that shapes legends and scars landscapes for centuries? A system poised to surge. The workings of a volcano are both methodical and unpredictable, a paradox of science and chaos. Beneath Mount Rainier, heat and pressure accumulate day after day. The mountain's interior is a labyrinth riddled with twisting magma tunnels, ancient dikes, and underground chambers, some mapped in recent years, others still elusive. To track these forces, scientists deploy advanced tools, seismometers sensitive enough to register the tiniest quakes, monitor for patterns in earthquake frequency and strength. When a pulse of quakes repeats, especially long-period events, With their slower undulations and ties to moving magma, alarm bells ring. GPS receivers, working in concert with satellite-based radar, can detect a bulge in the Earth's surface less than the width of a penny. Scientists obsess over these data sets, searching for asymmetry, a lopsided rise on one part of the volcano, or a rapid change in terrain over short spans. Yet, it's not the seismic or ground motion data alone that tells the story. It's the convergence of anomalies. The U.S. Geological Survey's role is not just to listen, but to interpret. The daily review of seismic records, thermal maps, and gas data amounts to a constant, tireless effort to decode the mountain's current state. Every piece of evidence shifts the calculation, an updated probability, a revised model, a cascading update to risk assessment for millions. For Rainier, the consequences are enormous. Unlike Hawaii's shield volcanoes, which typically have effusive eruptions, Rainier's eruptions are complicated by its substantial glacial cover. Pockets of magma rising near the summit can melt vast quantities of ice rapidly, spawning lahars, massive floods of ice, rock, and mud that surge down river valleys at terrifying speed. Researchers have modeled numerous lahar scenarios based on the mountain's history and potential precursors, such as those detected in July. Time, for those who watch Rainier, is measured not in weeks or months, but in centimeters of uplift, sequences of tremors, and rising hints of volcanic gas. Each clue builds until the mountain's intent becomes impossible to doubt. How much pressure can the system bear before the next phase begins? Which signal heralds the boundary between heightened unrest and outright eruption, when routine monitoring becomes a race against time? A warning that echoes. July's notice was more than a snapshot. It was part of an ongoing tapestry of insight, connecting scientists, emergency managers, and communities across the Northwest. Each update, archived with precision by USGS and partner agencies, is another chapter in the dynamic narrative of volcano monitoring. There is always the broader pattern to consider. Like a faint echo moving through the Cascades, an uptick in Rainier's activity sometimes coincides with changes observed elsewhere on the arc. Regional tectonics connect these volcanoes, and while their internal plumbing remains distinct, certain environmental triggers or systemic patterns can promote regional unrest. Here's why this matters. The Cascadia volcanic arc is deeply interconnected. When Rainier murmurs, so too might Hood, Baker, or St. Helens. Each volcano with its own unique mechanics, each responding to tectonic stress in complex fashion along the boundary of the Pacific and North American plates. In the past, USGS scientists have documented periods of increased small earthquakes or gas emission at multiple Cascade volcanoes, though these have usually not led to eruptions. Sometimes, these multi-volcano shifts subside quietly. Other times, they warrant elevated vigilance. But it's not just geoscientists who respond. Emergency planners review evacuation maps and protocols with mounting urgency, matching up new data with established plans. Agencies dissect bulletins from the Volcano Notification Service to decide when to intensify public communications or activate local measures. The proximity of the Cascades to major population centers amplifies the urgency. In communities like Orting and Puyallup, detailed lahar evacuation routes exist because a debris flow could arrive within an hour of detection. Sirens and drills are in place, but the necessary speed of response is a constant concern. For those who've examined past disasters through the lens of history, Mount Rainier's geologic story is not buried in legend or speculation, but in clear physical evidence scattered across western Washington. Deep deposits of volcanic mud, boulders strewn across valleys, forests felled and entombed. The electron mud flow, dating back approximately 500 to 600 years, is a particularly haunting historical marker. It transformed what is today a populous region into a vast mud plain in a matter of hours. Back then, the area was sparsely inhabited and preparedness was non-existent. Today, more than 4 million people live within 60 miles of the mountain, many unaware of how previous lahar flows shaped the valleys below. Each mudflow layer Each toppled remnant of ancient woodland is a silent archive, evidence that Rainier is not eternally dormant. And while modern technology offers unparalleled monitoring and communication, it cannot prevent or halt eruptions once natural thresholds are crossed. Scientists pore over past records, the patterns of pre-eruption earthquakes, the subtle uplift revealed in soils, the changing signals in volcanic gas a day or days before critical events. Watching the gaps. As the USGS notice made its way through state and county offices, another, more human truth surfaced. The most sophisticated network of sensors and scientists achieves little if the last mile between detection and real-world action falls short. In towns nearest Rainier's Lahar routes, sirens are intended to provide rapid warning. School children practice evacuation drills. Detailed plans outline escape corridors, assembly points, and communication protocols in multiple languages. Yet, interviews with residents after the July notice revealed gaps. In some areas, escape routes were hard to find or poorly marked. A few neighborhoods lacked modernized sirens, their alarm tones unsure to be heard above daily life. Many residents wondered if their phones would deliver timely alerts or whether local leaders even had the resources to ensure rapid mobilization. The region is famous for its innovation in technology and research, but when the mountain sets its own timeline, when every minute counts, the margin for error shrinks to almost nothing. In the background, uncertainty and misinformation can creep in. Some rumors exaggerate the likelihood of eruption. Others downplay even credible warnings. The pace of information, true and otherwise, can outstrip the best intentions of officials. That's why USGS, FEMA, and local agencies perpetually review and update their strategies. Can a scientific warning penetrate the inertia of normalcy? Can data prompt action in time? Or is familiarity with the mountain and a history of calm enough to engender dangerous complacency? Science on the front line. Behind each notification is the dedication of hundreds of scientists and support staff. Days spent in the field, calibrating equipment, nights scrolling through data feeds and thermal images. Every observation, every data point is a contest against uncertainty. The USGS Cascades Volcano Observatory is more than a collection of offices. Computers networked to field sensors, radar stations, and seismic arrays hum hourly with fresh readings. The scientists track variables as esoteric as low-frequency earthquakes and as basic as snowpack, knowing that either could contain the seed of the next phase of unrest. Specialized terminology abounds: uplift, harmonic tremor, gas flux, long-period earthquake. These are more than technicalities. They form the backbone of risk assessments, briefings for emergency managers, and the core of every update distributed to the Volcano Notification Service. Each anomaly is compared not just to local history or theoretical models, but to decades of experience from volcanoes worldwide. The goal is clarity. Is Mount Rainier's present murmur typical, or is it an omen? Each reassurance carries a caveat, each warning a shadow of previous miscalculations. Prediction remains an enormous challenge. Scientists must ask, day after day, have conditions changed? Does the data suggest increasing risk, or is it just background variation? When does vigilance tip over into full-scale mobilization? In the end, vigilance is the only constant. In the shadow of Rainier and across the Cascades, preparedness and knowledge underpin every quiet moment. Countdown in the shadow of the peak. Now, as July wears on and the initial notices settle into regular monitoring, the region waits. There is no guarantee, no precise prediction of when or even if Mount Rainier will enter a more dangerous phase. But the implications of any detectable magma movement beneath Washington's crown volcano are enough to command attention from every level of agency and community. So what does it mean to live beside such unpredictable force? To build, to hope, to plan on ever-changing ground? One certainty remains: Rainier and the entire Cascade chain are engaged in constant dialogue with those who observe them. For every signal, someone must be listening, ready to answer with swift interpretation and action. That is what the latest USGS notice demands, and what the people of Washington and the broader Northwest will need if history is not to repeat itself in mud, ash, and the long memory of the land. Because in this landscape, vigilance is not optional, it is survival. The question is not when the next alert will come, but whether, when it does, we will be ready to listen and act before nature renders warning into aftermath.